1963, the British Medical Journal published a letter which argued that a respiratory physiologist offering a unitary explanation of breathlessness should arouse the same suspicions as a tattooed archbishop offering a free ticket to heaven. As James has already explained, lung function measurements are kind of imperfect, and using the spirometer to represent breathlessness was problematic even in its 19th century inception by John Hutchinson. The spirometer tried to present vital capacity as a kind of proxy measure for lung capacity, and Hutchinson believed that this could be impacted by height, attitude, weight, age, and disease. So the idea that we're all breathing the same air in the same way was problematized even at the very beginning of spirometry. And data sets were specifically constructed around groups, which promoted the idea of normalcy within certain groups, or what we might term reference classes. But historically, the use of such reference classes has been variously linked to the determination of bodies as either inferior or superior. So for instance, Hutchinson didn't address vital capacity in women. He used the vital capacity standards of men as for women, rather than making separate studies. But this was actually a really unusual move to make in this time period, which was fascinated by the science of difference. Most scientists were sure that vital capacity was less in women. One study attributed this to the fact that women had a less keen need of air and argued that they would fare better at higher altitudes and working in front of hot stoves. And various theories were espoused to explain the lower lung capacity of women, and one of the most enduring was that men naturally breathed from the diaphragm, while women breathed from the chest. Oh. That is costal breathing. However, the association between corsets and costal breathing meant that this type of breath was linked with both civility and racial purity. For example, Dr. Kellogg's, of cornflakes fame, wrote that women who wore corsets and tight dresses gave tracings like civilized women. So costal breathing was largely regarded as an artificially created difference. But uncertainty about whether corsets were restricting breathing to the extent that it was altering vital capacity remained. And there was a great deal of confusion about, was this a sex difference or was this a gender difference? Not that they would have put it like that. But it wasn't until 1975 that the Medical Research Council proposed conducting studies that would stipulate the standardized respiratory values of normal women in Britain. And it's remarkable that it took this long. By 1844, not only did we have normal lung function values for men, we had normal lung function values for subdivisions of men. Firemen, policemen, wrestlers, small men, tall men, every man in between. But in 1979, the MRC researchers provided reference values for healthy British women for the first time. But how did they define the healthy subjects? Interlinked with the problem of appropriate reference equations is the difficulty of defining and assessing normalcy to represent a healthy population in the first place. And we can see this if we go back to 1936, when the MRC were investigating pulmonary disease among coal miners in South Wales. And their reports were crucial because they proved a link between length of exposure to coal dust and respiratory disability, which meant miners could be compensated. But adjudicating for disability was complex. It was very difficult to arrive at any kind of diagnosis using X-rays. But the spirometer offered evidence of respiratory disease in numerical terms that could be usefully used in this complex compensation network. But using spirometry in this way necessitated a definition of normal with which to make the comparison. And as we can see here, Gilson and Hugh Jones explained that this was much more difficult than the scant reference in the literature would suggest. And indeed, the MRC's 1936 clinical investigation used normal lung function values based on the miners already working in the mines. So their data sets used a normal standard set by apparently healthy miners rather than a non-mining control group, which wouldn't necessarily have mattered if the investigation involved the health of the same miners over several years. But as you can see from the map, it was comparing the health of miners in different areas to try and work out if the environment was causing pulmonary disease. But there was only one mine actually involved in the clinical investigation, and the spirometry test there was clearly flawed because it took its measure of normalcy from the very population in which abnormality was already apparent. And if causation from dust or disease couldn't be established, it followed that the problem must be related to the essential constitution of the miner. So innate biological causes and potential ethnic differences were sought in order to supersede the relevant social or environmental factors. So to conclude, I want to highlight these kind of potential negative consequences of essentializing social groups as distinct kinds to be categorized for measurement. Because historically, we can see that insistence on difference has worked to oppress already disadvantaged groups. And while it might seem intuitive to use categorical reference classes like sex or race, these classifications are based on a somewhat arbitrary supposition of relevance. And this approach risks obscuring the social causes of health inequities. Not only does it ignore the impact of biography and developmental plasticity on health, prioritizing certain categories of identity can conceal others from view and can obscure the social causes of disease. Thank you.